Hey groupers, well our trek through the Psalms continue this summer as we continue to go through these crazy times. Psalm 37. So, an icebreaker. Who is the person or persons in your life that you look to for wisdom? Maybe you would divide this question up. Who do you look to for wisdom about parenting? Who do you look to for wisdom about your marriage? Who do you look to for wisdom about your work? And it might be to describe the kind of work that you're in. Who do you look to for wisdom when it comes to the scriptures? And then who do you look to for wisdom when it comes to church? Those are two different things, scriptures and church. Well, Psalm 37, of course, is about wisdom. David writes as he looks back on life and he wants to impart some wisdom. Reread Psalm 37 and make a list, side by side. Make a list of a comparison list of those who follow God and how does David describe them? And those that rebel against God and how does David describe them? And then, after you've made this list, I want you to reflect on the list. What are some of the clear contrasts between these two groups of people? As you look at the list, talk about the stark contrast. And then, where do you see the same contrast still functioning in our society today for those who are rebelling against God? What hasn't changed? David writes this 900 years before Jesus, or really almost 3,000 years ago. His son Solomon says there's nothing new under the sun. What hasn't changed since this psalm was written when it comes to living outside of God's plan? Well, verse 4 is definitely the most famous verse in this psalm. David says that God will give us the desires of our heart. Of course, they have to match his desires first. When you became a follower of Jesus, and I know this didn't happen all at once or overnight, but what changed in you when it came to the relationship in your life with your life goals, with your life desires? What changed in your life? And what do you think still needs to change? No, don't answer that question for your spouse if they're in group with you. But what do you think still needs to change? What is God working on right now? There are probably some things that you are not aware of, but what are you aware of right now? And then, according to this psalm, what are some of the reasons we should delight in the Lord? David gives a few. Now, in verses 1 and 7 and 8, David says, don't fret. So first, what is fretting? It's different than worrying. What is fretting? And then, what does David say are some of the results of fretting? And finally, what things do you fret about? Right now, what are you fretting about? Well, David does want to talk about finances and their relationship to our hearts and our lives. As he looks back on his life, he has some wisdom to impart. And verse 16, 18, 19, 21, 25, 26 all have financial components. What is some of the advice? Look at these verses. What is some of the advice that David gives us about the godly use of our resources? And then, just to remember the application that we made on Sunday. What is something that you really, really desire, that you think about, that you want all the time? Maybe nobody else knows. Ask God if this desire is his desire for your life. Ask someone else. Someone's else. Ask a few people. Is this a godly desire? Should I be always thinking about this, always wanting this? Is this something that needs to change in me, or is it a godly desire? And then finally, pray about it and trust him to answer if these things come from him. Well, I hope that you have an enjoyable group, and I look forward to seeing you in a couple of Sundays when I get back from my mountain climb. God bless.